Bonjour and benez-vous. Je m'appelle Ryan McKern, and welcome to another episode of the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. New Orleans is a breeding ground for energy, its boisterous personality shrouded in lingering darkness, emboldened by devastating events like Hurricane Katrina and history of life of slavery and oppression. Located on the city's outskirts just west of the Luling on the banks of the Mississippi River, sets a timeless structure whose walls have absorbed over 200 years of history. Today, Oak Alley Plantation, named for the oak trees that line the property, is a National Historic Landmark reserved for conveying its history and the surrounding 48 acres. Visitors are guided through multiple exhibits that cover distressing topics like slavery and the region's race. As they walk through the 11,500 square foot big house, they'll feel the eyes of yesterday gazing at them, as residents and workers along still continue to salute and stake their claim to the sprawling plantation. The early years of Oak Alley, sugarcane and slavery. 21st century is all about reducing sugar consumption. Things were quite different over 200 years ago, when civilization was still ill-informed, and the negative effects of the delectable treat. Securing sugar today is quite easy, but the same can't be said for the 19th century. So anyone who stood at the earliest stages of viable sugar, supplied the line, could enjoy prosperity and affluence. With its wetlands and warmer environment, southern Louisiana was a potential gold mine for sugarcane. Enter Valcourt-Aimee, an already well-to-do planter looking to expand the sugarcane's operations. And with the Aimee that Oak Alley's story begins. In the early 1800s, he purchased a plot of land along the Mississippi and laid the foundation, figuratively and literally, for what would become one of Louisiana's most productive plantations. First, it would need a place by Aimee to call home, and by 1839, the big house, a Greek Revival-style mansion, was completed. However, by then, Aimee had already sold the plantation off to Jacques Telesphore Roman, his brother-in-law. The Romans weren't the last family to call the big house home, as Oak Alley Plantation was bought and sold on many occasions. Though new owners may have taken over the plot, one thing is tended to remain the same. Slave workers in the plantation fields, every individual that lived on the plantation imprinted a part of themselves into it and onto it, whether they lived through the heyday of the sugarcane production or carne about the during times of disease, insects, and pool yards. The big house and the nearby waters captured a piece of them, resulting in the results of the spirit energy after their passing. Over time, the plantation experienced financial difficulties, ultimately forcing it to be sold at an auction. With the Civil War over and new ideals sweeping the nation, the enslaved population found them freedom, and changes were desperately needed. The plantation just needed someone to take the reins, with Andrew and Josephine Sweet were happy to take on. The new owners and a new purpose. The longer time went on, the more it seemed that Oak Alley would slowly decay, as if a dark, malevolent force was rotting the plantation. The threat of time continued to weigh heavy on the land. Its stained history of slavery and unspoken turmoils further rotting the once lavish land, and Big House Oak Alley could have been lost forever, and its important lessons have gone with it. But in 1925, Andrew and Josephine Stewart stepped in and purchased the land. One of their first tasks was to return the mansion to its former glory, which architect Richard Koch took on and completed. The plantation underwent a brief, quiet period as the Stewarts involved in the fresh coat of paint and restored structure and the architecture. Then in 1972, the plantation changed hands once more. The Oak Alley Plantation Foundation took control of the acreage and big house, using it as an educational tool. In the following decades, the foundation restored the slave worker dwellings, which were demolished during the Stuart renovation, and added exhibits dedicating to the archaeological findings unearthed during excavations in 1976. The Oak Alley Plantation Restaurant and Inn opened its doors, welcoming curious locals and travelers with comforting southern cuisine and welcoming accommodations. Guests can sleep among the centuries-long history and, unbeknown to many, walk amongst the plantation's former workers and the mysterious lady in black. If you're reaching for a paranormal encounter at Louisiana Plantation, this is the perfect location to start. Oak Alley is especially primed for an eerie stay, its rows of oaks forming a natural canopy over the brick path leading to the big house, as an ominous welcome guests who have stayed on the plantation grounds and visitors to the foundation's exhibits tell of their ghostly encounters, some noting that the presence of children and unidentified old lady. Staffer warns of certain rooms within the big house they prefer not to enter. Otherwise, find themselves in a restless antebellum spirit trapped within the beautiful architecture stories of flying candles, flying candlesticks, and an unidentifiable wailing specter are commonplace among staff. One apparition most will agree has an undeniable hold on the plantation, the infamous Lady in Black. Who the mysterious long-haired shadow is remains a mystery, however. Some believe it is Selena Roman, the widow of Jacques Roman, who nearly bankrupted the plantation after her husband's death. Has she returned to ensure no further damage comes to the estate? Or is the Lady in Black a wandering soul, a nameless victim of years of slavery just looking for release? Oak Alley Plantation in Vacherie, Louisiana, is the epitome of what you picture for a grand southern estate. Large windows with shutters line the first and second floors, flanked by tall, white columns on either side, lining the path leading to the house on either side of the property's famous oak trees. The house is so picturesque that it's even made it to the big screen, acting as the house of Louis de Pomme Dula, played by Brad Pitt in The Interview with the Vampire. But lurking behind this beautiful architecture and southern charm is something much more sinister, perhaps a penance for its famous history, an infamous, heinous history. The Oak Alley Plantation is referred to as one of the most haunted homes in all of Louisiana, and for good reason. The property has several residents' apparitions that make regular appearances, and new ghost sightings are reported constantly. These spiritual anomalies and commonplaces in the area for surrounding New Orleans. If you want to experience some of the most haunted locations, please check NewOrleansGhosts.com. In 1820, the property was bought to raise sugarcane. Enslaved people were used for labor to work vaste écriche. Soon Jacques Roman took ownership of the land and decided he wanted to live on the site. From 1834 to 1837, his mansion was built. As most of the materials had led to the shipped in via steamboat, it was a vastly expensive and exhaustive construction process. Roman slaves carried out the entire building process. While there are records of several enslaved people escaping, there were between 110 and 120 enslaved people living on the property at the time. As they lived in one small area known as the quarters, disease spread quickly among the population, especially in the mid-1850s, when there was a yellow fever outbreak. After the end of the Civil War, the property was sold off at a very low price. While its days of owning slaves were over, the memory of plantation's morbid history was not forgotten. While the plantation now acts as a museum, staff and visitors alike continue to see strange sightings throughout the property, like dust blowing around the house, billowing in a spectral manner, when there isn't even a breeze to be found. So, who was responsible for these strange occurrences? Recognizable from their old photos, staff believe that several homeowners seem trapped within its walls. The question remains, have they chosen to stay in their beloved estate, or are they unable to leave? The ghost of Louise Roman. One of the Roman children was Louise. Having been in high society, Louise has certainly expectations for her courting process. When she turned of age, one night, a drunk gentleman caller stopped by and either tried to force himself on Louise or just really offended her. Either way, Louise wanted to get away in a hurry and began running up the long staircase. And wasn't the fashion at the time. Louise was wearing a dress with hoops in it, and she ended up tripping over her dress. She fell. She broke her leg quite badly. While the doctors did their best, gangrene did set in, and she eventually had to have it amputated. After the accident, no man would come near Louise, and she died alone. Today, one of the most commonly spotted apparitions is a woman in black, often seen with black or weaving hair in a black garment. She's been riding a pale horse throughout the property or standing near the staircase. People believe that this is Louise. Still heartbroken, cries are often heard throughout the home. Many believe these are Louise. A very special thanks to Oak Alley Plantation, NewOrleansCityGhosts.com, GhostCityTours.com. Josephine Stewart's second floor haunting. One of the most famous ghost stories from the Oak Valley Plantation involved 4 workers. After looking up for the night, they looked up and noticed from the parking lot that a light in one of the upstairs bedrooms was still on. They were sure all the lights had been turned off. As they looked closer at the bedroom window, they saw a woman looking down at them. Familiar with the family history, they recognized the woman as Josephine Stewart, the home's last owner. Rather than investigate further, the 4 drove off in their cars. When they looked back, the house was dark. Other accounts include guests and staff that often hear horses reining and clomping around the property. Specifically, they'll also hear the sounds of an ill carriage being drawn by a horse. The problem is that when they go to look at the horse, there is none. In fact, the property doesn't even own a carriage anymore. There could only be explained as remainders from the plantation's heyday. Other accounts include furniture and objects throughout the Oak Valley mansion being thrown and mysteriously move on their own. The rocking chairs, for example, have been spotted rocking in unison with no person sitting in the seat. Another incident involved a candlestick being thrown across the room. This happened during a tour when over 30 people witnessed the bewildering event. Just an hour away from Oak Alley Plantation is the beating heart of Louisianian culture, New Orleans. New Orleans has long ties to the underworld because of its unique history, and its history remains strong and proud to this day. Some notable films that have been filmed in Oak Valley Plantation is Interview with a Vampire in 1994, with the exterior of the Oak Alley Plantation Big House was used at the home of Vampire Louis, played by Brad Pitt. Long Hot Summer in 1995, a made-for-television remake of the 1958 film starring Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. Primary Colors in 1998, partially filmed at Oak Alley. Midnight Bayou in 2008. The house and grounds are featured as a haunted manor. The True Detective series in 2014 featured shots of the sugarcane fields. Days of Our Lives in 1984. The storyline was set in Oak Alley. Queen Sugar, 2016 to present. Scenes were filmed at the Oak Valley and in New Orleans. Other movies and TV shows filmed at the Oak Alley include Netherworld, 1992, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, 1964, Dixie, Changing Habits, 1983, Old South, New South, 2014, Haunted, 2012, A Taste of Louisiana, Chef Jean Fossé and Company, 1990. Oak Alley was also the architectural inspiration for the Braithwaite Manor in 2018 video game Red Dead Redemption 2. I'd like to thank you all for joining me again on this very special episode of the Wicked Webs Wee podcast. We are growing in subscribers, and I want to thank you all very much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for joining me on this mysterious journey as we warm ourselves by the proverbial fire. Please also check out the Spotify for the Wicked Webs Wee podcast. And until we meet again in a plantation nearby, au revoir.